Hello, everybody. Darren Alff here from bicycletouringpro.com. It is currently 11:50 a.m. here in Southern California at the moment. We are going to begin the live webinar today about bikepacking at 12 p.m. sharp. So we have about 10 minutes until I'm going to begin. I just wanted to start the webcast a little bit early so people would know that it's starting. And I also just like to start it a little early because I wanted to make sure the camera and the sound and everything is working the way that it should be. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, if you could do me a favor and just leave a comment, let me know. Can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? And also tell me where you're from, because when I've conducted these webinars in the past, it's pretty cool to see people from all around the world who show up. So yeah, just let me know where you're from in the world, maybe city and country. That would be cool. Like I said, we're going to start here in about 10 minutes, so just hang tight. 9 minutes now, but people are coming in. I see there's 82 people on at the moment, which is great. 84, they're piling in. I am going to, let's see. I'm just flipping over to this screen here where I can see your guys' comments. Okay, so Bearman says, greetings from Russia. Hey, Darren. Greetings from Finland. Eric Hoffman. This is Eric from Klamath Falls, Oregon. Cool. Eric. Beard Brothers. Darren, what do you dream of? Haha. I often dream about soccer. What was I going to say? I'm reading your comments. Yes, Puerto Rico. Hi, Darren. Hi, Ich bin says, hi, greetings from Germany. Attila says, alles gut. All is perfect. I'm Portuguese, living in Germany. Lataro says, everything is okay. Cool. Receiving you fine, Darren. Says Nigel. Hello from High Wycombe in England. I think I've been there and I can't even say it right. Hello from Portugal, Portugal, Netherlands. Cool, lots of people coming in. Thank you, guys. Like I said just a moment ago, I started the webinar just a few minutes early just to make sure that the camera and the sound and everything was working properly. So hang tight. We're going to begin in 7 minutes. Yeah. In the meantime, yeah, leave a comment. Let me know where you're from. And yeah, I'm reading some other ones. Aurora, Colorado, Rap 02, bikepacking the Arizona. Oh, cool. Doing a trip on the Arizona Trail next month. Oops, here from Tampa. Where's Tampa? Tampa? Hello. Loud and clear in Missouri. Cool. On the camera, on my screen at least, it looks like my face is all white, like it's blown out on the camera, so I'm sorry about that. There's just like a bright sun coming down. Hopefully that's okay. Hi, buddy. Really like your new fat bike. Yeah, I'll be talking about that. Or is it on this side? This side. I'll be talking about that in just a moment. So, hello, greetings from Serbia. Cool. Whoops, I'm losing some of you. Sweden, Brisbane, Australia, Miami, Florida, Wales, Denmark, South Africa, John from Cape Town. That's cool. Hello, everyone. Salute from Geneva, Switzerland. I'm going to be there in Geneva, hopefully, this summer, so I'll talk about that in just a minute. Hello from Mexico. Hello from Slovakia. I'm going to be in Slovakia as well later this summer. I'll talk about that. Cool. Yeah, just hang tight, guys. About 5 more minutes, and then we'll begin. I'll be talking about bikepacking today and bicycle touring. You can see I have 2 of my bikes behind me, and I'll kind of talk about the difference between these 2 different bikes. But right now, we're just kind of letting people come in, and we'll begin here in just a moment. So thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hello from Denmark. Hello from Croatia, Russia, Scotland. Richie says, my wife says you owe her 2 months of my salary because it's your fault I'm touring Europe on unpaid leave for 2 months. Sorry, Richie. Jason says, hanging tight in Amsterdam. Cool. My German is terrible, David. What does that mean? Servus mein Besser? Something, my best. Oh, some like best wishes or something from Deutschland. Hi from Romania. Hello from Philippines, Florida, South Wales, UK, Slovakia. Another from Slovakia. Cool. All right. I'm going to just step away from the webcam for just a moment. We'll begin here in 3 minutes or so. I'm just going to fill up my water bottle glass of water, and I'll come back, make a couple quick announcements, and then we'll begin the webinar on the basics of bike packing. So hang tight. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I have too many screens open. One moment. All right. So we'll begin here in just a moment, guys. 3 minutes left. I said we would start at 12 o'clock, so I kind of want to wait and let people show up. So thank you for showing up a little bit early here. I'm still reading all your guys' comments. Hello from Irvine, California. Woo! Australia. I'm in California, by the way. Australia, Irvine, Ireland / Venezuela. That's very different. Hello from California. Whoops, I don't know, I lost someone here. Mark says, what time to start? 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and then we'll start. So hang tight, Mark. We'll begin in just a moment. Richie has a question about being vegan or something to bike tour. No, you don't need to be vegan to bike tour. Before we begin, oh no, the gardeners just showed up. It's going to be noisy. Oh, the timing is so good. Right as we begin. Let me just, hopefully they are going to be, yeah, they're bringing the leaf blower right over here. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'll try to speak loud over the lawnmower and leaf blower. But, gosh darn. That was terrible. What was I going to say? I got distracted by the gardeners now. So a couple quick announcements before we begin the webinar on bike packing. There are a bunch of events coming up that you can join me on. And all of the details for these upcoming events are on the website at bicycletrainpro.com/calendar. So if you go to bicycletrainpro.com and look, there's a red bar up at the top of the screen. And on that red bar, there's a button that says Events Calendar. Click on that button, and you'll see that there are a number of upcoming events. The first event was this live webinar today. The second event is an overnight bike tour that I'm doing on March 10th here in Southern California, where I'm going to be getting a bunch of Bicycle Train Pro readers together like you. And we're going to do a short overnight bike tour from Camarillo, California down to the beach in Point Mugu. And we're going to camp at a campground, a state campground there on the beach, and have a campfire and eat burritos. And then the following day, bike back to Camarillo. So about 40 miles total, 20 miles each day, very short. The whole idea is kind of more like socializing and just meeting some people with similar interests and that sort of thing. So that's the weekend of March 10th and 11th. And if you're in the Southern California area, I would love it if you considered joining that trip. Several people have already signed up, and there is limited space for this trip because I have to reserve the campground in advance. And the campground can only hold so many people. So if you're interested in joining this overnight bike tour, I'm calling it the Southern California Bikes and Burritos Overnight Bike Tour. Yeah, all the details on that are up on the Bicycle Train Pro website at bicycletrainpro.com/calendar. I am also doing 2 guided group bike tours in Europe this summer. I'm doing a week-long bike tour in northern Portugal and Spain, And this is going to be an amazing bike tour. I think there's already 15 people or so signed up for this trip, including myself. So if you want to cycle with me in a really spectacular part of Europe, that is a great tour to consider. I am also going to be joining a guided group bike tour in Switzerland with an amazing company called Bike Switzerland. The tour that we're doing is called the Light Tour, and it's one of the easiest ways to ride your bicycle across Switzerland. And this is a high-end tour where we stay in fancy hotels and eat delicious meals, and they kind of cater you in every sense of the way. They carry your gear so you don't have to cycle with it all day on your bike. We stop for lunch every day, and they kind of create like a gourmet picnic. And yeah, it's going to be spectacular. Many of you know that I have biked across Switzerland several times previously, and I think Switzerland is like one of the best places in the world for bike touring. So if you've never been there, or if you've always wanted to go to Switzerland, or you've always wanted to maybe go on a bike trip with me, this is your opportunity. So all of the details on those 3 upcoming bike tours are once again on my website at bicycletouringpro.com/calendar. Once again, guys, there are some gardeners behind me at the moment with lawnmowers and leaf blowers. So I hope you can hear me okay. I'm trying to speak loud so that, you know, I'm speaking over that. They should be gone in a few minutes, hopefully. So just hang tight. That's all the announcements that I wanted to make. Once again, all the information's up on my website, bicycletouringpro.com/calendar. But now it is time to begin my webinar, my live YouTube webinar on the basics of bike packing. And before I do that, I guess I should introduce myself, because some of you know who I am and some of you do not. So for those of you who maybe don't know who I am, my name is Darren Alff, and I am the Bicycle Touring Pro. For the last 18 years now, I have been riding my bicycle around the world. And for the last 10, going on 11 years, I've been running the website at bicycletouringpro.com, where I teach people like you how to conduct their own bike tours all around the world. So through my articles and podcasts and videos here on YouTube, and through my live meetups and stuff, God, the gardeners are loud. I basically teach people how to plan, prepare for, and execute their own bicycle tours all around the world. I'm so sorry about the gardener noise. Can you guys hear me okay? Just leave a comment and let me know. Sounds good, no noise. Okay, not hearing them. Okay, hopefully that's the case. They're getting louder, it feels like. Anyways, so that's kind of who I am. And yeah, I'm trying to think, how does this webinar work today? What we're going to do is I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes or so about bike packing, give you kind of some instruction, information about what kind of bike to ride, what kind of bags to use, what you need to pack, how to camp along your tour, and a whole lot more, how to find routes and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to be discussing. And while I'm doing the presentation, I'm not going to be looking at the comments so much. So I apologize if I'm not responding to your comment right now. However, I will, after I'm finished talking, I will take some time to answer any questions that you guys have. So hang tight. Hopefully after I get through the bike packing information, if you guys have any questions about anything I've said about bike packing, that would be the perfect time to ask me that question. Also, if you want to ask me something about traditional road touring or world travel or stealth camping or anything else that you might want to ask me, that would be a great time to do that. So yeah, let's begin, shall we? Okay, 1 second. I gotta stand up because I want to start by pointing out something. Okay, I'm gonna go off the screen here. This is like a magical entrance. Are you ready? Okay, so this is how bike packing got its name. I can't even put it on. But this is a backpack, the kind of backpack that people use when they're doing a long distance backpacking trip. Say you're going up into the mountains for a whole week or even longer maybe. This is the kind of backpack that you might wear. And this is actually the backpack that I wore when I backpacked across Peru for 6 months. I wore this on my back for 6 months straight. And that's where bikepacking gets its name. It's a play off of backpacking. And it's essentially, bikepacking is backpacking with a bike. And just like traditional road touring, this is a traditional road touring bicycle. And this over here is a bike packing bicycle. And I'll talk about the difference between the two in just a moment. But the thing that both of these bikes have in common is that unlike a backpack, where all of the weight of all of your food, gear, clothing, camping equipment, etc., is basically on your body. It is on your body. All of the weight is on my shoulders, essentially, right now. And some of it's down on my waist or whatever. But for the most, it's all on my body. And these bicycles are designed in such a way that the weight of your gear, your food, water, clothing, camping equipment, etc., is all off of your body and carried on the frame of the bicycle. So you can see all the bags here are mounted on the bike. And most, but not all, I'll talk about that in a moment, most but not all bike packers and bicycle tourists travel with all of their gear on the bike. And they do that in part because this right here, over several hours, days, weeks, months, is incredibly painful. It causes, rashes up here and soreness and redness and pain. You can hurt your neck and all sorts of things. So the advantage to carrying your gear in this way, where the weight of the gear is on your bicycle, is that you don't have this discomfort that comes from wearing a big, heavy, cumbersome backpack like this. So I'm going to take this off because it's really hot. But I wanted to show that to you because this right here is a big backpack, and these bags behind me are smaller bags that essentially carry the same amount of gear that you could carry in this giant bag. But here the gear is scattered in various places all around your bike, and the same is true here. The gear is scattered in smaller bags all around your bike. So anyways, bike packing is backpacking with a bike. And a lot of people describe bike packing as like the combination of mountain biking with backpacking, what I just showed you, backpacking, right? So that's what bike packing is. But a lot of people have confusion about the difference or similarities, perhaps, between bike packing and bicycle touring. And the truth is, bike packing is bicycle touring. It's just a subtype of bicycle touring. So there's many different types of bicycle touring. Bicycle touring is essentially, I'm sorry, the gardener is like right here. I'm gonna move. Bicycle touring, okay, I gotta move just because he's like right there with the weed whacker. So bicycle touring is basically the act of traveling on your bicycle for days, weeks, months, or years on end under your own human power. There's no motor on your bicycle, basically. Although now electric bicycles are becoming more and more popular, and a lot of people are doing bike tours on electric bikes. So that's the definition is kind of changing. That's going to be another subtype of bicycle touring in the future. But there are a bunch of, I'm going to go back now. Hopefully he's done. Plugging my computer back in. Sorry, guys. I didn't know the gardeners were going to show up right when I was beginning. But so bike packing is a type of bicycle touring, and a lot of people get that confused. They think that like road touring or bicycle touring in general is some different type of travel. In reality, they're very much the same. There are differences, however, because while bike packing can be done essentially on any type of bicycle, like it can be done on a road bike or a touring bike or a mountain bike or a hybrid bike, most of the time when people say that they are bike packing or they want to get into bike packing, they're talking about riding in off-road conditions. Whereas bicycle touring, like this bike here, is designed traditionally for road touring, mostly traveling on roads. So this bike is designed mostly to go on paved roads, but it can handle a fair amount of off-road riding. And this bike is kind of the opposite. This bike is designed to go mostly off-road, and it can also handle some on-road riding. So that's really like the biggest difference between bicycle touring and bike packing. Bike packing typically denotes a form of off-road bicycle touring. The other major difference when people say that they went on a bike packing trip versus a bicycle touring trip is in the difference or distinction between how their gear was carried. So you'll note that on the two bikes behind me, the bags that are mounted on these two bicycles are very different from one another. And so this is a traditional road touring setup. You'll see that there's a big handlebar bag here. There are 4 backpack-sized panniers. These bags that are on the front and back of the bicycle are called panniers or panniers, depending on how you pronounce it or whatever. But all of your gear is carried on these bags, and this is a traditional road touring setup. So when people say they went bike touring, usually they're talking about this kind of a setup. Whereas if someone says they went bike packing, they're usually talking about this kind of a setup where there are no racks and panniers on the bicycle. So this bike here, there's a rack. It's hard to see here. It's kind of like behind the bag, but there's a rack on the front of the bicycle and there's a rack on the back of the bicycle. And those racks mount to holes in the frame of the bike. And then these bags are mounted onto the racks themselves. Whereas this bike packing bicycle over here, these bags that are mounted on here are essentially mounted to the bicycle with just like straps and Velcro and stuff like that. There are no actual like holes drilled into the frame of the bicycle, designed specifically to mount these bags to the bike. So the big advantage to a bike packing setup like the one you see behind me is that you can use almost any type of bicycle for bike packing. In fact, like a lot of people will just use the mountain bike that they already have, and that's perfectly fine for their bike packing adventures. If you got a mountain bike already, you're probably set to go on a bike packing adventure. You just need to get a few of these bags, figure out how to pack everything in them, and then you're good to go. But you'll oftentimes see people or hear people saying that they went bike packing when in reality they were riding a bicycle more like this. They were riding a road bike and riding almost entirely on the road. Now, it might be incorrect to say that this is a bike packing bicycle. It would be more correct to say this is a bicycle touring bicycle or a touring bicycle. But what you'll see sometimes is people riding this type of bike, not with the panniers on them, but with a bunch of bags like this on them. And so that too can also be called bike packing. And yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the distinction between the two, because I know for a lot of people, there's this big confusion, or they think that bicycle touring and bike packing are two totally different things. But the skills that are required to do this type of travel and this type of travel are very much the same. The difference is probably more than anything the technicality of the riding. Off-road riding over rocky, bumpy terrain is much more technical and challenging, and there's a greater potential danger for hurting yourself on a bike packing trip. Whereas a road touring trip, for the most part, you're traveling on smooth paved roads. There's not a lot of obstacles usually, and so this is generally like a much smoother, safer sort of ride. What else do I want to say? I'm looking at my notes here. Oh yeah, the other thing that I should just mention about the difference between these two bikes while we got them behind me here is that this setup here with the panniers behind me, one of the reasons that people use this kind of a setup on a road tour is because these pannier bags are bigger than what you can get on a bikepacking setup. So a lot of bikepacking setups are very ultralight. Every step, everything has been done to make this bicycle as light as humanly possible. Now, you can pack super light on a setup like this as well, but if you're the type of person that's planning a trip across America or a trip across Africa or a trip around the world or something, you're probably going to pack more in a way like this for a number of different reasons. One, because you can get more stuff on the bike. One of the hardest things that people kind of forget to think about when they're first starting with bicycle touring is the amount of food and water that you're going to need to have to carry on a bike. A lot of people will pack their bicycle so that every bag is totally full and they still haven't made room for food yet. So if you want to eat while you're out on the road, you got to remember always to pack in such a way that you always have empty space inside your bags for food that you're going to pick up along the way. And the longer the stretches that you're going to ride through, the more food you need to bring with you. So like if you're doing a bike tour in Europe, for example, Europe, the cities and towns and stuff are all very close to one another. You might only go 10 kilometers and then you're in a new town. So in that instance, you don't need to carry much food or water with you, just maybe enough to get you through the day or whatever. But if you're traveling through the interior of Iceland or you're going across some remote country in Asia, you need potentially to have the room on your bicycle to carry a whole lot of food. And I've gone for 5 or 6 days sometimes without going into a store, right? I knew that I was going through an especially remote part of the world. And so I would stock up 5, 6 days worth of food on my bicycle. And that's relatively easy to do with a bicycle touring setup like the one you see behind me here in the red. Carrying 5 or 6 days of food with this sort of setup is a whole lot harder, just because there's not as much space on the bike to carry all your food. So that's just something I wanted to say. Also, the reason this type of setup is not used for off-road riding so much is because these bags will bounce around when you're riding in rough terrain. Like I said, they're mounted onto racks on the bicycle, and they will stay on there as long as you have a good set of panniers. They'll stay on there and not fall off or anything. However, they will bounce around. Even the best panniers on the planet bounce around in rough terrain. Whereas this sort of a setup, it's designed in such a way that these bags will not really bounce around. There might be some back and forth movement on this like seat bag that you see here, and there might be some movement on the handlebar bag in the front. But for the most part, these bags are designed not to move. And that's what makes this sort of setup ideal for off-road bike packing. Okay, enough about that. I'm just thinking I missed something, but okay, so what do you need to start with bike packing? There's really only a few things you need to get started, and you might already have most of these things already. So just like with bicycle touring, you basically need a bicycle, some way of carrying your belongings with you. And in this case, you're going to be using a set of, these are called like frame bags. And like I said, seat bag, handlebar bag. I'll talk about the bags here a little bit in just a moment. But so for bike packing, you need the bike, you need some bags to carry your stuff in, you need some camping equipment. Usually on a bike packing trip, people camp. The whole idea oftentimes with bike packing is to get out in nature, get away from the cities. You know, it's an off-road experience, so you can really go into some remote areas. So camping is a big part of the bike packing experience. So you need some camping equipment, which I'll talk about more in just a moment. You need clothing to wear on the bike and to potentially wear off the bike at the end of the day in your tent at night, maybe while you're sleeping. You need food and water, which I mentioned. And finally, you need a map of some kind, whether that's a GPS or a paper map. And you need some bike tools, you know, a pump, multi-tool, a patch kit, and that sort of thing. So that's basically all you need to get started. And there are a bunch of little extras that you could add, like you could add a camp stove, and you could add a water filtration system, and you could add an emergency beacon, and you could add, I don't know, personal electronics or whatever to your kit. So, but those are the 6 basic things that you need: is a bicycle, bags, camping equipment, clothing, food and water, and maps and tools. And so, like, for most people, if you ride a bicycle already of any kind, you pretty much probably have at least 4 of those 6 things, right? You might have a bicycle already, a mountain bike that you could use. You might have some camping equipment, maybe you don't. Clothing, food, maps, tools, all that's kind of basic. So one of the biggest things that you probably need to get if you're going to get into bike packing is a set of bags like this. And this is going to be your biggest investment probably to get started in bike packing. And there are a number of different types of bags, as you can see. I'm going to try to move closer so you can see this bike a little more. Okay. I think that's good there, maybe. Okay. So, yeah. Before I talk about the bags really quick, I do want to talk about something that just makes this bicycle unique, because I said a moment ago that pretty much any type of bicycle could be used for bike packing, and that is true. However, bike packing has become so popular in the last few years that there are now companies making bicycles that are designed specifically with bike packing in mind. And this is one of those bicycles. This is a bicycle made by a company called Chumba Cycles, or Chumba USA. They're located in Austin, Texas. This is my bicycle, by the way. And yeah, this is a bicycle that's designed specifically with bike packing in mind. One of the things that makes this bicycle unique from maybe just your typical mountain bike that you might have in your garage already is you'll notice that the tires on this bike are very big. Someone made a comment earlier that they said, "Hey, I like your fat bike." Well, technically, this is actually not quite a fat bike. This is a bike that has 29 plus tires on it. So it's borderline fat bike, basically. But 29 is like a relatively new and popular tire size. But 29 plus is even fatter than the regular 29 tire wheels and tires. And the reason that you see a lot of bikes like this in the bikepacking world with fat tires, big tires, is because it makes the ride more comfortable when you're riding off-road. This sort of bike, when you roll over little rocks and gravel and that sort of thing, you really hardly feel at all. Whereas this sort of a bike, which is designed more for road touring, when you ride this off-road, you can do it, but it's a much more bumpy sort of experience. So these big fat tires make the ride more comfortable, and you can roll over obstacles easier because you're going to be hitting logs and rocks and stuff as you ride potentially. The other thing that makes this bike unique as far as the tires is concerned is the fact that these tires are tubeless. There are no tubes inside of the tire. So a traditional bike tire like this one, there's the metal rim, which makes up the wheel, and then inside there's the rubber tire, basically, which is the outside of the wheel. And inside of that tire is a rubber tube that you then inflate with air, and that's what kind of holds the shape of the wheel. This, however, there is no tube actually inside the tire. There's basically just the rim and the tire. and there is a seal between the rim and the tire which holds in the air. And there's, I don't know what the best word is, I'm blanking on it at the moment, but there's sealant basically inside of these tires, so that if I run over a small thorn or a little nail or something like that, I can pull those thorns out, pull the nail out, and that sealant will go into the hole in the tire and dry, and I can basically just continue riding with what would have normally been a flat tire in a bike like this. So tubeless tires are quickly becoming the norm in the bikepacking world. Pretty much all bikepacking bicycles nowadays are using tubeless tires, not only because it makes the bike easier to repair, like if you do run over something, you can continue riding. You might lose a little air pressure or something, but you can usually continue riding. The other advantage, though, is that because there is no tube in these giant tires, the overall weight of the bike is dropped considerably. So like this bike, I'm sure just by looking at it, it looks kind of heavy, right? But you'd be surprised, especially when you take all the bags and stuff off, just how light this bike is, considering how big it is. And a large reason why this bike is so light is because there are no tubes inside the tires. I should mention, however, that if you were in an emergency situation where you couldn't get these tubeless tires to seal for whatever reason, you could put a tube inside the tire, and a lot of bike packers do carry an extra tube with them for that purpose. If they were to get in a situation where they maybe ran over a big old nail or something, and the hole was so big in their tire that they couldn't get it to seal, you can put a tube inside the tire, blow that up just like you would blow up any other bike tire, and then continue on your way. So that's something that's good to know, I think. The other thing that makes this bicycle unique to a regular mountain bike, the mountain bikes that you might be used to, is the fact that this bicycle, I'm going to once again try to get a little closer just so I can show you, getting kind of dark over here though, is that there are a bunch of eyelets on this bicycle. Eyelets are basically like holes in the frame of the bicycle that have been drilled there specifically so that you can mount things to the bike. And I'm going to try to hold this still so you can see it. But right here on the front fork of the bicycle, there are a bunch of different eyelets. There's one here, these little silver things. These are the eyelets. And there's some down here. So you can see I have mounted, with the use of these eyelets, a water bottle cage onto the side of the front fork. And there's another one on the other side over there. So I would not be able to mount these water bottles to the bicycle without these eyelets on the fork. I mean, there might be a way to do it otherwise, but it would be not as sturdy. So a bike like this has a bunch of different eyelets all around the bicycle, designed so that you can mount different things in different parts of the bike, and you can configure the bike in different ways. So here's some more. There's more holes basically in the frame of the bike right here, so that I can mount this water bottle on the underside of the down tube. There are more eyelets down here, which allowed me to mount this accessory bag, which is almost down underneath the bottom bracket practically. And in the back, you'll see that up here, there's an eyelet here, and there's an eyelet, I'm going to try to show you right there as well. These two eyelets on the back are there so that if I wanted to, I could mount a rear rack on the back of the bicycle, just like the rear rack that I have on the back of that bicycle. So, and there's also eyelets up here on the front of this bike as well. There's one here and there's one down here. Those eyelets would allow me to mount a front rack on this bicycle if I wanted to. So this bicycle that you see behind me, this is the Chumba Ursa 29 Plus bikepacking bicycle, by the way. This bicycle is designed so that if you wanted to, you could set it up in the way that I have it now, which is a traditional like bikepacking setup, or you could take all of these bags off and set up the bike in much the same way that you see this bike here, with a front rack and a front set or a rear set of panniers. So that's pretty cool. Like, I think that's really awesome. And that's actually like one of the reasons I really liked this specific bicycle, is because of the fact that it has so many different eyelets, which allows for so many different configurations. And what you're seeing a lot of nowadays actually is a combination of bike packing techniques, so packing with various frame bags and that sort of thing, in combination with the traditional road touring setups with panniers and things like this. So you will oftentimes see people with, like if you go to Google and just type in bikepacking bikes or something, you'll see tons of pictures of people, and you'll notice that the setups that they use are all kind of a little bit different. This is just the way that I've chosen to configure my bike at the moment, but there are different ways that you could do it. So yeah, what I was trying to say is, you will sometimes see people packing in this way, but they'll also have like a set of rear panniers, maybe 2 small pannier bags like you see here, on the back of their bicycle or on the front of their bicycle, or both. So that's kind of cool to know too. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future. I think bicycle touring and bike packing are going to blend a lot more in the future. So you're going to see this combination of packing techniques. The last thing that I wanted to say about this bicycle is, you'll notice that there's no suspension on the bike. It's a hardtail bike. There's no suspension in the back, and there's no suspension in the front. And a lot of people who are new to bike packing are kind of surprised by this, because they assume that suspension makes the ride more comfortable, and it does in certain situations. However, the reason that suspension is not used on most bikepacking bicycles is the same reason that suspension is not used on most traditional touring bicycles. And that's because suspension of any kind, front or rear, takes away from the power, the wattage that you can generate while riding your bicycle. So as soon as you add shocks to your bike, riding on smooth or uphill terrain becomes more difficult. And that's the reason, essentially, that most bikes, most touring bikes and most bikepacking bikes, do not use suspension. You will, however, see some bikepacking bicycles that have front suspension. That's relatively common, but you will almost never see a dedicated bikepacking bicycle with rear suspension as well. That being said, if you have a full suspension bicycle in your garage and you are happy riding that, you are more than welcome to use that on a bikepacking adventure. It just might be that if you're doing a longer trip, you might benefit more from a setup like this, where there's little or no suspension in the bike at all. Okay. Bikepacking bags. Let's talk about the bags really quick. I'm going to move back so you can see here. I'm going to try to speed up because I want to answer you guys' questions. I know you have a lot, but okay. So there's a number of different bags on the bike, as you can see. I'm going to grab my water really quick. One of the questions that people have when they're first starting with bikepacking is, they see all these different bags and they think, do I need to get all of those, or like, you know, which ones are essential, basically? And it's kind of hard to say. Every situation is different, but for most people that are starting out, I think a great way to start is by getting one of these bags, which is the seat bag. This is I believe it's the Shenandoah seat bag, made by Wanderlust Gear. In fact, all of the bags that you see on my bike are made by a company called Wanderlust Gear. And they too are located in Austin, Texas, in the United States. And yeah, all of these bags are designed to go together. So it's kind of cool. You'll see the camouflaging that is, you know, basically on almost all the bags except for the frame bag here. But if you're just starting out, I would recommend going with this seat bag at the very beginning and this larger handlebar bag that you see up front. That's what I would begin with, because these two bags are the larger, basically, of all of the bags that are on your bike. And in here, I store my sleeping bag, which is generally your sleeping bag is usually like the largest item that you bring on a bicycle trip of any kind. So this bag is big enough to store your sleeping bag as well as some extra stuff. You could put some clothing or something in there, food, whatever. This bag, whoops, here, which is the handlebar bag. This is a large, like, roll top bag. I'm gonna try to get closer so you can see it. It's a little dark, I'm sorry. But yeah, so this, I'm talking about the camouflage bag under here. This is the handlebar bag, and I have my tent inside of there at the moment. So my entire tent with poles and the rain tarp and everything, ground cloth, all of that is in there. And there's still plenty of room inside to put other things as well. So this bag, I feel like, is a little bit harder to access. So I usually put things in there that I know that I'm not going to need until the end of the day. Like, I don't know, maybe the food that I want to eat for dinner or something like that. Or maybe my warmer jacket, like a fleece jacket or something. I'll put that in there as well. While I'm here, I should point out that there is this smaller bag that I have on the front of my bicycle. This is a handlebar bag as well. Both this camouflage bag and this black bag are handlebar bags, or bar bags. You'll hear them called both things. But this bag underneath is basically used to store things that you don't need to get to very often, like your tent. And this bag is the opposite of that. This is like a handlebar bag that you could store all of your stuff in that you need to get access to very easily. So I usually put like my snacks that I'm going to be eating while I'm riding in here, maybe my camera, my wallet, things like that I would need to access regularly on my bike trip. So those are the two bags basically that I would recommend you start out with if you're first getting into bikepacking. And what a lot of people will do when they're first getting started is, if you don't want to spend a bunch of money right from the very beginning on all these bags, what you can do is just go on a short, like, overnight bike trip, 2 days, 1 night, and carry some of your stuff. Like, I would get this bag and the front bag, and that's it. And then whatever else you need to carry with you, clothing or camping equipment or whatever, just carry it in a small backpack, not the kind of backpack that I showed you earlier. That's way too big. Just like a small, like, school-size backpack. Or a lot of bikepackers will use a hydration pack, like a camel pack, and carry that. So they have a bunch of water on their back, but there's also room inside that backpack for maybe like your rain jacket and some clothing, food and things like that. So you could start out with just a small backpack, this seat pack, and this larger handlebar bag. Then if you still need room on your bike, that's when most people jump up to this frame pack. This frame pack fills up the entire inside triangle of your bicycle, and these frame packs come in different sizes. I think Wanderlust Gear, I think they make it in 3 different sizes or something like that, depending on the shape of your bicycle's main triangle. But this bag has a lot of space inside of it. However, it's kind of awkwardly positioned because it is basically right between your legs. You can't overstuff this bag in the same way that you can overstuff these 2 other bags. And that's why I personally recommend getting the handlebar bag and the seat bag before you get the frame bag. So you just need to be careful with how you pack this. Usually you want to carry the heavier items down in the bottom and lighter items up in the top. Because if you pack in the wrong way, this bag will expand and your legs will rub up against the bag while you're riding, and that you don't want that. So you don't want that because it's annoying, because it'll cause chafing on your legs ankles or whatever, and it'll potentially rub a hole in the bag. So you don't want any of those things. So the frame bag, though, is really useful. I usually use this to store my tripod and clothing and food. Yeah. And then you'll notice that I have this bag. This is called an accessory bag. This one is called the Monida accessory bag, and it's a round cylindrical bag about the size of a medium-sized thermos. And I store my sleeping pad inside of here, but you could really store any number of things that you want in here. I know a lot of people use this for water storage, or they do actually carry a small thermos with them so that they can have they can make hot chocolate or coffee in the morning and then carry it with them all day long as they're riding. So that's kind of cool. And this bag also is insulated. It has an insulating layer inside of it that you can remove if you don't want that insulating layer, and so, which makes it perfect for coffee or cold drinks or whatever you want to carry. Then up top, I'm going to move there. Up top here, whoops, come on. This up here near the front of my handlebars, this is called a top tube bag. And it's a small, almost like camera-sized bag, like you would put your digital camera in or something. And that is actually how I use it. I put my digital camera in here so that it's very easy to reach while I'm riding, and I can take a picture without getting off the bike or whatever. But this is called a top tube bag. This is the Bear Grass top tube bag from Wanderlust Gear. And then finally here, I have some, these are another type of like accessory bag. But these are, I'm trying to find a good angle to show you, but there's two of them. There's two of these bags up near the handlebars on my bike, and these are called stem/bar bags. And they're basically like a multi-use bag. But what is so great about them, in my opinion, I don't have them equipped in this way just yet, but I store my water bottles up here in these bags. So there's one on the right side of the handlebars, I'm trying to get it, and one on the left, right? So that's how I use these particular bags, but other people use them to store food. Some people put their camera lenses in, like if you're traveling with a DSLR camera, you can put your camera lens in those bags, and they're highly protected up here on your handlebars so that they aren't getting too jostled around as you ride. So those are basically the main bags that you're going to see on a bikepacking setup. And like I said, if I were you and I was just getting started, I would look into getting just this seat bag and just this front handlebar bag, the larger handlebar bag that you can store your tent or something in. So yeah. Hopefully that covers it. Let's see. Which one? Yeah, I mentioned earlier that some bikepackers carry a backpack of some kind or a hydration pack, and that's a good way to, like, even with this setup, it can be hard to get everything you need inside here. And so a small, not a large, but a small backpack that you wear as well is extremely common in the bikepacking world, and that might just be all you need as far as extras are concerned to get started on your own bikepacking trips. Very quickly, I guess the last thing I really want to talk about is the distances and speed and camping equipment. I'll just run through the camping stuff really quickly. Most people with traditional road touring, like you see here, are carrying a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping mat. However, with bikepacking, where you're trying to go ultralight, oftentimes, I'm going to move this back. There are four main techniques for carrying camping equipment. The first of which is just to use a lightweight tent, and that's generally what I do because I like the safety and the security that a tent provides, especially if you run into rain or something like that. Sorry, rain or something like that. it's nice to be inside of a tent that gives you so much more protection. The other technique that you'll see quite often with bike packers is that they'll be carrying a hammock with them. And a hammock is, you know, like this cloth, a lightweight cloth material that you hang from two trees or poles or something and sleep in, like Tarzan in the jungle or something. And this is popular because a lot of these hammocks fold up to very small sizes, so that you know, the tent here is taking up quite a bit of room and it weighs quite a bit, whereas a hammock is a whole lot lighter. However, with a hammock, you have to be in an environment where that supports the use of a hammock. So you need to be in forests pretty much every single night. If you're not in a forest or a place where there are trees, there's going to be nowhere to hang the hammock, and you're going to be stuck sleeping on the ground. So you wouldn't want to use a hammock on a desert bike tour, for example. Yeah, so that's another technique that people use. I should mention too about the hammocks is most people who are carrying a hammock on their trip are not just carrying the hammock itself, but also like a small tarp that they will put over the top of the hammock in case it rains, because you don't want to be in a hammock in the rain. You're just going to get soaked. So as small and lightweight as a hammock is, you got to keep in mind that it can only be used in certain situations, and you're probably also going to have to bring a tarp with you, along with some strings and stuff to tie the tarp up. So there are some limitations to using a hammock on a bikepacking trip. The other thing that people will do is they'll use a bivy sack. And a bivy sack is like basically like a small waterproof tent that goes over your sleeping bag or sleeping pad while you're sleeping. It's basically like it's the shape of a sleeping bag, but it's usually waterproof and it goes over you as you're sleeping. So you're basically just laying on the ground inside of a waterproof sleeping bag. That's kind of what a bivy sack is. And the advantage to this is that they fold up really small, and there are usually no tent poles with a bivy, or if there is a pole, it's like very, very small, maybe just 3 feet long or something like that to lift the tent material up off of your head. But otherwise, the material is like basically just resting up against the top of your body. So if it starts to rain or something inside of a bivy, you could potentially feel that rain hitting you, although you might not be getting wet from the tent or wet from the rain, as long as your bivy is waterproof. So that's another technique that people use for lightweight bikepacking. And the fourth and final technique that they use for camping is using a set of tarps to protect them from the elements. So you might bring a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag, and then you just have 1 or 2 small tarps that you know, maybe you lay one tarp on the ground and you string up another tarp from the trees or whatever to cover your head while you're sleeping. But the sides of this tarp are just open to the environment. So you're basically laying on the floor of the forest or something like that. So those are the 4 techniques: tents, hammocks, tarps, and bivvies. And each camping technique has its benefits and drawbacks. I personally just like the tent technique. I'm maybe because it's what I'm most comfortable with. But if you're looking for an ultralight solution, then one of those other techniques, a hammock, a tarp, or a bivvy, could be better suited for you. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about, whoops, where'd it go, was the speed at which you travel, because the difference between this sort of bicycle touring and this sort of bicycle touring means that there's quite a big difference in the speed that you travel each day, as well as the distances that you cover. So on a road touring bicycle like this one, you're generally traveling at about 10 miles an hour, which is about 16 kilometers per hour. That's on a relatively flat surface. That's kind of just an average, right? It might be less than that, it might be more. But that means that most road tourists ride somewhere between like 40 and 60 miles a day, but that can go up to like as much as 100 or more miles a day, depending on the terrain and how you're feeling and that sort of a thing. So 40 to 100 miles, which is 64 to 160 kilometers per day on a road touring bike like this. Once you start to go off-road, however, the road becomes more challenging and technical. You're traveling generally at a slower pace. Most bike packers are probably averaging maybe 8 miles per hour, which is like 13 kilometers per hour. So significantly slower than on a bike like this. And most bike packers generally travel maybe 25 miles up to as far as 75 miles in a single day. That's 40 to like 120 kilometers per day. So when you go bike packing, generally you're not covering the distances that you would be able to cover on a road bicycle. And that's just something to keep in mind, because I've talked about this before on Bicycle Touring Pro, but like the biggest mistake, maybe the biggest mistake that first-time bicycle tourists make is that they aim to cycle too far in any given day. Like when I first started with bicycle touring, I joined my local bike club and my university bike club as well. I used to race on my university racing team, and we would ride fast road bicycles, and we would start out in the morning at 7 o'clock. And by 10 o'clock, we had already gone 60 miles because we were traveling so fast, you know? And so it's very easy if you're used to that type of cycling to think like, wow, I did 60 miles in 3 hours, so I'd be able to do 120 miles in 6 hours. But the fact of the matter is, when you're bicycle touring, you're carrying a lot of gear, which slows you down. You're not as aerodynamic as you would be on a fast racing bicycle, so that slows you down as well. Plus, you're generally going through areas that you're not familiar with. Like when you ride your bike at home and you know where you're going, you don't even have to think about where you're going to turn or how you're going to get home. You already know that information, and that speeds you up a whole lot. But when you're doing a bike packing trip or a road touring trip, you're constantly having to like check your map, check your GPS to figure out where you are, make sure you're going the right way. You'll occasionally run into a road that's closed and you have to go way around. So all of that slows you down, and that's why I was saying the biggest mistake that people make is they plan to go too far in a given day or over, you know, several days, weeks, or months. They plan to go too fast and too far. So I'd recommend you stick to those limits of what I just said. What did I say? 40 to 60 miles on a road touring bike. That's pretty common, but up to maybe 100 miles in a day if you're in really good shape. And then bike packing, you probably want to start out doing no more than 25 miles per day or 40 kilometers, and then amping it up to as much as 75 miles per day or 120 kilometers per day. I think, I'm looking at my notes here, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I want to get to Q&A time. So if you guys are interested in learning more about bike packing, just make sure you check out my website at bicycletouringpro.com/bikepacking. I got a bunch of information up there, and a lot of the bike packing posts and stuff that I've written in the past are linked to on that page. So there's tons of information up there. I just recently posted my complete bike packing setup, which is this here. So I've detailed everything that I bring with me on my bike packing trips. It's up now on the Bicycle Touring Pro YouTube channel, or Bicycle Touring Pro website, I'm sorry. Once again, bicycletouringpro.com/bikepacking. All of the details are there, but in that article I detail like what kind of bike this is, you know, what kind of pedals I'm using, what each and every one of these bags is, how many water bottles I'm carrying, what tools I'm bringing with me, which clothes I wear on my bike packing trip, which exact tent, sleeping bag, and sleeping pad I actually use. So all of that is up now on bicycletouringpro.com. Just go there, go to the bike packing page, or simply go to the search bar and search for bike packing, and you'll see all of the articles I've written on the subject. Okay, that's it for my little presentation on the basics of bikepacking. Now it's time for Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, if you guys have any questions about bikepacking, bicycle touring, world travel, stealth camping, safety, anything that you guys want to ask me, now is the time. If you're watching on YouTube, there should be a comment section over on the right or maybe on the bottom, depending on if you're watching on a phone, tablet, computer. But yeah, I'm going to just pick some questions now and we'll go through them. The Scarecrow says, how do you tell if a water source is safe to enter a drink? Do you test it or just go for it? That's a good question, and I've had some problems myself on some of my previous bike tours with this. If you're questioning whether the water source is good to drink, I would say, first of all, like, if you can, just try to buy bottled water. When I was bicycle touring in Africa, I was basically just drinking bottled water. And I just recently completed a trip through Ecuador and Colombia, and for the most part, I was just drinking bottled water. Now, I don't like to use all that plastic, and I frankly don't like spending money on water. But in certain situations, I do think that's probably the safest way to go. So that's my first recommendation. If you can't find bottled water, however, it can be a little bit tricky. I have never personally tested my water before I drank it. I just kind of judge based off of the way it looks and stuff, which is kicked me in the butt in a couple instances in the past. So yeah, I don't know what to say. A lot of bike packers, because they're traveling through off-road areas, and they're back in the mountains or something like that, they'll bring a small water filtration system with them, and that's kind of what I would recommend, especially if you're planning to go through an area that's remote. If you're doing a trip like this where you're on a road bike and, like I said, going through a place where there's cities and towns quite frequently, you don't have to worry so much about water. There's always going to be places where you can get water. But once you do something more remote, yeah, then water becomes a big concern. And there are, small, lightweight filtration systems. There's even like these, I think they're called life straws, which is basically like a straw that has a filtration system inside of it, that you can stick that straw down into like a pond or a lake or a river or something, and you just suck the water up through this filtration straw. And the straw is very small. It's about the size of a bike pump, and it's very lightweight, and that's something that you can use to filter your water as well. But yeah, a lot of the filtration systems are kind of heavy. Some of them require batteries. There are battery operated ones. I don't really like those, just because what if the batteries die? But yeah, there's a lot of options out there. It just depends on the trip. So I just got a question from a Jolly Hiker. Thank you, a Jolly Hiker. He or she says, when bike packing is pulling a trailer recommended? Yeah, so there are, like, in the bicycle touring world, there's generally like 3 or 4 different ways that people carry gear on their bicycles. This type of bike with the panniers and handlebar bag behind me, this is like the most common traditional setup. And so panniers are the first way to carry your gear. The second probably most common way to carry your gear is in a trailer that you pull behind your bicycle. And before bike packing became popular, this sort of setup, most people who were traveling off-road would, instead of using a set of panniers, because they bounce around so much and because they make your bicycle wider, a lot of bike packers would simply use a mountain bike where they pulled a trailer, a single wheel trailer behind them. Like the Bob Ibex is probably the most popular off-road bike packing trailer. And you still do see some people using trailers on bikepacking off-road expeditions, although it's becoming less and less popular because more and more people are starting to pack in this way. And the big disadvantage for a trailer, which has always been one of the big disadvantages to a trailer, is that, well, one, the third wheel, there's a wheel on the back of the trailer, and sometimes there's two wheels on the back of the trailer. Every wheel that you have touching the ground basically makes it harder for you to pedal your bicycle. So 2 wheels on the ground is better than 3 wheels on the ground. So right away, adding a trailer adds that third wheel and is going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to pedal your bike, especially when you're going uphill. The other thing is maneuverability. On a bikepacking trip, you might be going around some really sharp turns, and not all trailers can handle those steep switchbacks. Whereas a bike like this, which is pretty narrow from front to end, can turn very sharply. So trailers are being used, but I think they're being used more on like dirt and gravel road touring expeditions, and not so much on single track trails. Another thing that I should mention about the difference between these two bikes, I'm going to stand up just to show you this, but when there are instances when you're bicycle touring, when you encounter like steep terrain or rocky terrain and you have to get off of your bicycle and push. Now, I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like with my road touring bicycle really quick. So you'll see that these bags stick out quite a bit on the side of the bike, and they're sticking out in the front as well. So when you're pushing a bicycle like this up a hill, for example, you have to watch out not only for the pedal down here, which could potentially hit you in the leg or whatever, but you have to watch out for the bags as well, which makes it's kind of a learned technique, but you have to almost walk with the bicycle out to the side, way out to the side like this, so that you don't hit your legs on the pedal or the panniers that are sticking out on the side of the bike. Now, this sort of setup, I'll show you here. You'll notice that there's nothing sticking out down here on the side of the bike. There is the pedal still a little bit, but I can walk very comfortably next to this bicycle. See how close my legs are? Without having any sort of interference. And that's what makes a bikepacking setup like this so much better for off-road riding, because with a setup like this, you're more likely to encounter the sort of terrain that's going to require you to get off of your bicycle and push. And so this sort of bike is better to push than the one that I just showed you. Okay, let's see what other questions we got here. Oops. Monkey, I'm butchering your name. Monkey Emil said, oh, what precautions do you take in terms of safety? I'm thinking of doing my first tour, but I'm not sure how to make sure that I can get help in emergencies when I'm in a remote area. So yeah, there are actually like a number of emergency beacons that bicycle tourists and bikepackers have carried with them. The most common one that I know of is the Spot. I think it's called the Spot emergency beacon. It's like a bright orange GPS looking device that basically you turn on and it tracks where you are. So if you have friends or family members back home, they can like see where you are and follow you on the road. The public can't see you, but only the people that you kind of give permission to. And this emergency beacon also has the ability to call for help in the event of an emergency. Say you flip over your handlebars and hit your head on the trail or something, you can hit that emergency beacon and the police will be called, or a helicopter will be called, or whatever. So that is a valuable tool, and it's something that you do see a lot of bike packers carrying more often than you do see road tourists carrying. Because usually, like, if you get in trouble on a road-based bike tour, you can kind of just flag someone down and ask for help. But on a bike packing trip where you're back in the backcountry and you might not be seeing people for days on end, you are your own source of rescue. So that's probably the thing that I would recommend most. Although it depends where you are in the world, because some places you pretty much have cell phone reception no matter where you are, and pretty much all cyclists today are traveling with a phone of some kind. So you might be surprised that even out in the deserts and forests of so many places around the world, you can get pretty good reception on your phone. But like I said, it depends on where you are. And so one of those emergency beacons might be something to look into. The Scarecrow says, what was that insect that bit you in Ecuador? So I was in Ecuador a few months ago at the beginning of 2017, and I was out on a bike ride in the mountains, in the jungles of Ecuador, and I felt something on my ankle. At the time, I was pushing my bike up a really steep mountain road, and I felt something just hit my ankle, and it felt almost like, like a needle being injected into my ankle, basically. And I looked down and I saw something big and brown on the side of my ankle. I don't know what it was, but I flicked it away really quickly because it was causing me pain. And I basically had an allergic reaction from whatever it was that bit me. I don't know what it was. I think it could have been a spider or something like that. But I rushed back to town, got to a hospital, and they treated me. But God, that was not fun. Bot fly? Yeah, maybe it was a bot fly. I don't know. Let's see. I'm just trying to go back through your questions here. David says, Darren, do you have hydraulic disc brakes on the Chumba? And is your chain wheel the usual 3-cog setup? That's a good question. So the first question about brakes, no, I do not have hydraulic disc brakes on my bicycles. Both of these bicycles that you see behind me have cabled disc brakes. And there's a reason for that, actually. Hydraulic disc brakes are technically supposed to be superior to cable disc brakes. But the reason that you see cable disc brakes on most touring bicycles is because if the cable were to break, it's relatively easy to fix. Whereas with hydraulic brakes, if the fluid starts to leak out and you lose that pressure, it's almost impossible to fix while you're out in the middle of the road. So, I mean, it's not impossible, but it's difficult, and you have to carry special tools and that sort of a thing. Whereas if you're using just cable disc brakes, all you need is a very small, very lightweight backup cable that you carry with you. So your cable breaks, you install a new cable very easily, and you're on your way. And that is something that you will see with most touring bicycles that are out there in the world right now, is that they are designed in such a way that if something were to go wrong with them, you could very easily fix them while you're out there on the road. So that's the answer to the hydraulic question. You'll almost never see hydraulic disc brakes on touring bicycles, and probably not on many bikepacking bicycles either. That could change in the future, but for the moment, cabled disc brakes are the thing that most people are using. And then finally, you asked about, the chain wheel, the usual 3-cog setup. So on most touring bicycles, this one over here, there's usually 3 chain wheels in the front of the bike, I'm going to show you again so people know what I'm talking about. up here, usually there are 3 chains, or yeah, that allow you to shift gears up in the front in that bottom bracket section. This bicycle is different because I don't have the 3 cogs that you would find on a normal bicycle. This is a pinion gearbox. So all of my gearing here is actually inside the frame of the bicycle. There is no chain on this bike. There's just this like carbon fiber rubber belt, and then all of the gearing is on the inside of the bike. And the advantage, one of the many advantages to this, is that you don't have to worry about cleaning the chain all that often. Like this bicycle over here is using a metal chain that needs to be cleaned on a regular basis, especially when you're riding in dirty off-road conditions. This bike, you basically never have to clean this thing at all. You just wipe it down with a towel and you're on your way, which I really appreciate because I'm lazy and I hate bicycle maintenance. So that's kind of nice to have. But you are seeing now some of these bikepacking bicycles that are coming out now with the pinion gearbox on them. And this gearbox that I have on my road touring bicycle, this is an 18 speed gearbox. So there's 18 total speeds. And this is probably the largest, I think it is the largest gearbox that Pinion makes for bicycles at the moment. However, there are much smaller and much lighter gearboxes that company makes, and they are putting them on bicycles like this now. And I think that's really cool because the chain that's on a bike like this has to be maintained all the time. If you hit a rock or something, like you're going over a rock and that rock hits that chain, you can totally destroy the chain. Not only will it break in half potentially, but you could just dent it to such a degree that you can't ride your bike anymore, or you have to remove that specific part of the chain. So yeah, it's pretty cool. 2 totally different setups here. But my bike over here, once again, this is the Chumba Ursa 29 Plus bikepacking bicycle. This bike is currently set up. I have 2 main gears up in the front, only 2, not 3. And they make this bike in a number of different ways. I think you can get it set up with 3 if you wanted it that way. But the most common setups are actually with 2 like this, or with only a single gear up front. And the single gear is kind of nice, and it's actually becoming more and more popular. Even though there's only 1 gear up front, you still have all the gearing in the back. But the advantage to that is just it makes your bike lighter because you don't have a derailleur and you don't have another chainring up there. But also there's less likelihood of the chain coming off of your bike if you're not having to switch back and forth between these various different chain rings. So yeah, my bike only has 2, and I've found that to be more than enough on this particular bicycle. But every bikepacking bike is different. And like if you order a bike from Chumba USA, like they will ask you which type of setup do you want. Like this bike doesn't only come in 1 configuration. You can kind of set it up however you want. Let's see. I'm just trying to pick a good question here. Okay. Michael says, not everyone has 6K to drop on a bike though. Yeah, both of these bicycles that you see behind me are on the high end of the bikes that are out there, but you don't need a bike this expensive to get started. There are lots of bikes that are much more in the starter range. In fact, I just posted a few days ago on the Bicycle Touring Pro email newsletter. I sent out a message saying that REI is currently having a deal on their road touring bicycle. They have a bike that's very similar to this one over here. And it's on sale right now for like $780. So that's like a really good starter road touring bicycle. And then as far as a starter bikepacking bicycle, like I said, all you really need is a mountain bike. So you can get, there are mountain bikes out there for a couple $100 that you could get and start out with. So you don't need to immediately jump up to something like this. I am a bicycle touring pro, so I feel like it's important to have a good bicycle and to be kind of a role model or whatever, but you don't need to immediately jump out and buy an expensive bike. Dr. No says, why do you not use suspension? I've already kind of talked about that, so you may want to go back and see where I mentioned that earlier. Christopher says, what do you think about bar ends? So yeah, that's another interesting topic when it comes to bicycle touring. You'll see here on this bicycle behind me that there are drop bars, the same type of handlebars that you would most commonly see on a road racing bicycle. And these sorts of bars are most common on road-based touring bicycles, and they're especially common on American or North American road-based touring bicycles. When you go to Europe, it's more common to see something, handlebars like you would see over here, kind of flat handlebars, or maybe what, I forget who asked the question. Sorry, I missed it somehow. But yeah, flat handlebars are most common on like European or Asian touring bicycles. And that has to do with oftentimes personal and societal preferences, but also it has to do with hand positions. So the question was about bar ends. Bar ends are these like bull horns that go on the sides of your handlebars. And a lot of bike packers and bicycle tourists will put these bar ends, which you can buy for 20 bucks, 40 bucks, something like that, on the end of your handlebars. And they're really good because they give you a different hand position in which to put your hands. This bike here behind me, the bikepacking bicycle, really only has one position in which to put your hands as you're riding. There's a straight handlebar that comes across, and you really can only put your hands in a few positions on the handlebars. Whereas this handlebar setup behind me has a number of different hand positions. So you can put your hands like this, you can put your hands here, you can put your hands here underneath, you can put them in the drops down below. And the advantage to that is that when you're doing a long distance bike tour, you're spending several hours on the bicycle every single day. And you're riding oftentimes for days, weeks, months, years on end. And so a bike like this, where you only have one handlebar position and you're leaning forward into those handlebars, it can cause nerve damage in your hands if you ride in that position for too long. So if you're riding a bike like this with flat handlebars, you either want a set of bar ends, which allows you to move your hands over to the sides of the bicycle as well as here in front. So you can put them here or here. So now you have two different different hand positions, which is going to be better for your body and for the nerves in your hands. In 2002, I rode an old mountain bike, just a regular old mountain bike, very similar to this one actually, but it was a piece of junk. I rode that across America on the Trans-America Trail, and about halfway through the trip, I started to experience numbness in my hand. It started up here to where my hand just kind of hurt, but then as the trip went along and I spent more and more time in the saddle, not moving my hands around on the handlebars as I rode, the pain started to go further and further down my arm. There's a nerve here. I think it's called the ulnar nerve or something like that. But there's a nerve in your arm, and you can pinch it by having your hand pushed up against those handlebars. And if you pinch that nerve, it cuts off the feeling. Basically, it usually goes all the way up to your elbow and maybe even a little bit beyond. And it's a terrible, terrible pain that can last for like weeks or months afterwards. And you don't want that to happen to you on a bike tour. And so that's why a handlebar set up like this with multiple hand positions is going to be better than handlebars that are just straight and only really have one or two positions. in which to put your hands. Now, there's a bunch of different handlebars that are out there on the market, but most touring bicycles have handlebars that provide you with a bunch of different handlebar hand positions. So there's like butterfly bars, which are shaped in almost like a figure-8 pattern, because those are popular for bicycle touring because you can put your hands here or here or here or here or here, and you don't get that hand pain that you would get on a bike like this. So yeah, just something to keep in mind when you're shopping for a bike of your own, is that's probably like one of the most important things if you want to be comfortable on your bike, is to get a bike that has handlebars that allows you to move your hands around, so that you don't pinch that nerve in your hand. Igor says, do you prefer wild camping or camping in campsites? And when will you visit Slovakia? So yeah, that's a good question. I personally prefer wild camping, just camping out in the forest or the desert or something. I like that because I like the solitude. I feel like the purpose of camping to a large degree is to get into nature. And when you go to a established campground, you might be camping technically, but you're kind of just in a parking lot with a whole bunch of strangers. And so for me, I don't really like campgrounds so much, although I do stay in them occasionally. If given the choice, I would prefer to camp out in some scenic location by myself versus sharing a crowded parking lot of a campground with a bunch of strangers. That's just personal preference for me. However, I know a lot of people who do bike tours prefer the campgrounds because they feel safe there, and because most campgrounds provide you access to a shower and electricity. So those are important things as well. I still prefer camping out in the wild, even if that means I'm not going to get a shower that night. But it is nice to occasionally dive into an established campground to yeah, have some of those luxuries provided to you, shower and safe place to sleep and all that kind of stuff, people to talk to. Michael says, any tips when it comes to finding a location to camp? Do you check at the start of the day or when you're done riding? Any apps you can use to help? Yeah, so again, it depends on where you are in the world. Like, that's one of the things that I've learned over and over and over again, is that you know, I've ridden my bike through 70 different countries around the world, or maybe a little more, and every place is different. So I was just talking to my parents the other day here in Southern California and telling them how terrible California is really for bicycle touring, or just for getting out in nature in general. Because like here where my parents live in Southern California, there are nature areas nearby, but when you go there, it's just crowded with a bunch of people, and those areas have a bunch of rules, like you can't camp, or if you can camp, it costs $55 a night, or things like that. It's just terrible. Whereas other places, like I was in Sweden this summer, where even in a crowded city, there are places around the city where they have actually set up places where they're encouraging you to come out and camp, or make a campfire and hang out with your friends and have a barbecue and that sort of a thing. So every single place in the world is different. And where you are in the world dictates what your camping is going to be like. So for me, as far as like, do you find your campground in advance? Do you find it just once you're out there on the road? It depends on your trip as well. All of my early bike tours, when I was just starting out, I did not want to have the anxiety of trying to find a campground every single night. So I did a lot of research before I even left home, and I figured out where all the campgrounds were that I was going to have to stay at. And so that way, every day I woke up and I knew, like, okay, the next campground is 45 miles away or 65 kilometers away, and that's what I'm going to have to cover today. And when I reach that campground, that's where I'm going to stay. And I did that for every single night of my tour, so that when I left on day one, I knew where I was staying on every single night of the trip. And that's probably a good way to start out if you're new to bicycle touring, is to plan your trip in that way. However, a lot of people who go on bike tours do not do as much advanced planning. And now that I have 18 years of bicycle touring experience, I do almost no planning at all as far as where I'm going to sleep at night. I just kind of find places to sleep as I'm going along. And once again, it depends where you are in the world. Like I did a trip in Taiwan a few years ago, and the accommodations there were so cheap and so everywhere. Pretty much every small little town or village had some cheap hotel that you could stay in for 20 bucks a night or less. So it was very easy to just simply roll into any town in Taiwan and find a place to stay. There are other parts of the world, however, like America or like Norway, for example, where you could roll into a town, but the hotels are going to be so expensive that most bicycle tourists are not going to want to stay in a $200 hotel each and every night of their trip. And so it's in those instances where you either need to do some advanced planning so that you know, okay, there's a hotel coming up that is within my budget, or you need to have a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping mat with you so that you have the option at least to camp. And so like a lot of bike tourists will go on bike trips with no camping equipment at all, with the plan of simply staying in hotels or hostels each and every night of their trip. And that's fine as long as you know that there are going to be places to stay, because you do, the last thing that you want on a bike trip is for it to get dark, you to still be out on the road, and you have nowhere to sleep. And you can't find anywhere to sleep. And on top of that, you don't have a tent or a sleeping bag or a sleeping mat with you that you could just pitch on the side of the road and pack up in the morning. So it is somewhat restrictive to not carry a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping mat with you, but it's also freeing a little bit to not have a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping mat with you, because those three items are three of the largest and heaviest items that most bicycle tourists carry with them on a bicycle tour. So it just depends. As far as apps that you can use to find campgrounds, I'm not exactly sure. I don't have one app necessarily. I use this offline mapping application for the last several years, at least. I've been using this application called maps.me. And it's an offline mapping application, so you don't need internet access in order for it to operate. You kind of download the maps. Say you're going to the United Kingdom. You would download the entire map of the United Kingdom onto your phone, and then you simply refer to that map later once you're out there on the road, and you don't need to be in a place where you have internet access. So that's what you need. If you're planning to navigate with a smartphone, for example, is you want to have some kind of offline mapping application. But as far as finding campgrounds, I usually just use Google. I use booking.com a lot to find cheap hotels. I use airbnb.com to find cheap apartments to rent. Airbnb has like quickly become one of my favorite ways to find accommodations on my bike trips. I have rented apartments in dozens and dozens of countries all around the world, in Istanbul, Turkey, and Varna, Bulgaria, and Vienna, Austria, and Poznan, Poland, and Cape Town, South Africa, and I don't know, all kinds of places all around the world. So I think that's a really good tool to use. But as far as finding campgrounds, on this maps.me application, there are in some parts of the world, there are icons that note where there are free shelters. You'll see these up in Canada a lot of times, in Norway, Sweden, Finland, places like that. You'll see a lot of these shelter icons. I think it's like a triangle on the map. But a a lot of these shelters have places where you can sleep. They have fire pits, picnic tables, and some of them, not all of them, are free to camp at. So that's kind of something to look for. That's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm out on the road. I'm always looking for a free place to stay. So yeah, those are some of my recommendations. One question here, what is the best tent? That is a good question. And again, tents are relative to where you live in the world. The tents that are sold in America are oftentimes different than the tents that are sold in Turkey. So it's hard to say, but the tent that I've been using for the last several years, it's probably my favorite tent that I've ever used. It's the Big Agnes Copper Spur one-man tent. And there's several different models of this tent. The one that I have now is called the Big Agnes Copper Spur HV Ultralight one-man tent. And it comes in, I think it's orange or green. And I have this, I used to have the orange model, and now I have the stealth green model. So yeah, that's kind of cool. It's a small, lightweight one-man tent, but it's big enough that you can sit up inside of it. I think it's very spacious inside, and there's enough room inside the tent to store all of your belongings, which is another thing that I just thought of, which I didn't mention earlier. One of the advantages to packing your bicycle like this with the panniers and the handlebar bag is that these bags pop off of the bicycle super easily. So let's say, for example, that you're camping in a campground and you don't want to leave your bicycle and all of your belongings just outside of your tent. Maybe you want to bring your belongings inside of your tent. Well, that's very easy to do with this pannier setup. Look at this. All you do is pull up and the bag is off very, very quickly, right? However, on this bicycle, getting all of these bags off of the bike, say you wanted to bring these bags inside your tent at the end of the day, it's much more time consuming. You got to undo every little Velcro strap and that sort of thing. So these bags, once you have them mounted, are not easy to take off. Whereas these bags over here are very easy to take off. So if you're staying in hotels, this is probably a good way to go, because a lot of hotels will not allow you to bring the bike into the hotel room, but you can very easily unclip these bags, bring the bags inside the hotel room, and then lock the bicycle up, say, somewhere in the garage of the hotel somewhere. That is oftentimes what happens. Whereas if you stay in a hotel with this bike and you want to bring things into your hotel room with you, it's going to be a lot more difficult because, well, these bags are harder to get off, and because you have so many different bags. Like these bags over here, you can carry the 2 front panniers in one hand and the 2 rear panniers in the other hand and easily go up to your room. Here, there's a whole bunch of different bags. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different little bags that are on this bicycle here. That's going to be a whole lot harder to remove and a whole lot harder to carry. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, guys, I've already gone for an hour and a half. So I'm going to do one last question maybe, and then that will be it. Dean says, what are the best pedals for touring? So again, it depends. At the moment, I have my bicycle over here. This is a CoMotion Siskiyou touring bicycle, by the way. CoMotion Cycles, I've been riding a CoMotion bike since 2012. Really good bicycles, very, very nice. Can't say enough about them. But what was the question? Pedals. At the moment, on my road touring bicycle, I just have a pair of flat metal pedals. I'll show them to you really quick. But on my last 2 bike tours, the ones that I did in South America and the ones that I did this past summer in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, I was just using a flat pair of pedals like this. And
They aren't the cheap plastic kind that usually come on bicycles. These are metal, so they're a little bit better made, and they kind of grip to your foot a little bit better. But these are the pedals that I'm currently using on my road touring bicycle. However, I've used SPD pedals for years and years and years before that. But I'll talk about that in just a second. Over here, let's see if I can show it. These right here, this is the SPD pedal. And this is a pedal that allows you to clip your shoes into the pedal on the bike so that your shoe is basically locked onto the pedal here. And the advantage to this is that, well, with a flat pedal, you can really only push down on the pedal. Here, because your shoe is locked to the pedal itself, you can push down on the pedal and you can push up. So there, you can generate more power with a pedal like this. But the other main reason that I have these SPD pedals on my mountain bike, my bike packing setup, and the reason I don't have them currently on my road touring setup is because when you're riding off-road, you're bouncing around a whole lot more. And one of the dangers to bicycling in rough terrain is that you could slip off of the pedals as you're riding and hit your groin on that top bar, or flip over the handlebars or something completely. And that is not a fun thing to do. So these SPD pedals, because they clip to your shoes, will work to further prevent you from slipping off the pedal as you ride over rough terrain. The reason that I don't have SPD pedals on my road bike at the moment is, one, because when I did my last 2 bike trips, I just wanted to bring a single pair of shoes with me. I didn't want to have one pair of shoes that I biked in and another pair of shoes that I walked around in. That's something that I've done on my bike trips in the past, is I've carried 2 different pairs of shoes. So I wanted to experiment with just having 1 pair of shoes. And the way that I was able to do that was by switching from SPD pedals to flat pedals. So that way I could just wear a flat, regular pair of tennis shoes or like lightweight hiking shoes while I was cycling, and then I could use that same pair of shoes when I was walking around town or whatever at the end of the day. So it's really a matter of personal preference, but the reason flat pedals work better on a road touring bicycle is because you just don't encounter those bumps that you do encounter on a bike packing sort of trip. So this SPD pedal secures you more safely to the bicycle. You're not going to slip off of the bike, whereas over here you could slip off, but it's less likely to happen on a paved road because the road surface is smooth and you aren't being bumped around as much as you ride. So yeah, it kind of just depends on what you want to do. But yeah, that's those are my thoughts on the various different types of bike pedals. Okay, guys, it's 1:38 already. We're approaching the 2-hour mark. I gotta go. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you showing up. Hopefully you learned a little bit about bike packing, and I look forward to sharing some more bike packing videos with you on the Bicycle Touring Pro YouTube channel coming soon. I've got some videos from a short overnight bike tour that I did in the Flagstaff, Arizona area. And I've got a really cool video coming up from a bike packing trip that I did on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So those several videos, I've got a third video from Monument Valley in northern Arizona, which is really spectacular too. So all 3 of those videos are going to be posted very, very soon on the Bicycle Touring Pro YouTube channel. I've been posting a new video every week. So stay tuned for the new videos coming up. And like I said earlier, if you want to learn more about bike packing, just go to my website at I forgot what it was, go to my website at bicycletouringpro.com/bikepacking, or just go to bicycletouringpro.com and enter bikepacking in the search bar, and you'll see a bunch of articles and stuff that I've written about the subject already. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a little something, and I look forward to meeting you guys out on the road sometime soon. If you're interested in joining me on one of my upcoming bike tours, be sure to visit the website, bicycletouringpro.com/calendar. There's a bunch of events coming up, including my Southern California Bikes and Burritos overnight bicycle tour, as well as 2 guided group bike tours that I'll be participating in this summer in Portugal and Switzerland. So take a look at the calendar on the Bicycle Touring Pro website. Consider joining me on one of those 3 upcoming bike tours. And thank you once again for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, guys, that's it. I'm Darren Alff from bicycletouringpro.com. Hope to see you guys out on the road sometime very soon. Have a good day. Bye.